Hello doll friends, this is Michael Canadas with the Grovian Doll Museum and the Carmel Doll Shop. We are lucky to be at the Susan and Lou Nunez collection, and they have opened up their home and their cabinets for all of us to enjoy and hopefully to learn a little bit. We're in the main hall of the house, and we're going to look at some items in this corner cabinet. Mainly the things on the top shelf. And it's actually a really wonderful metal cabinet that was in Susan and Lou's New York apartment home. And they brought it when they migrated to California, they brought it with them. And it's beautifully outfitted with some wonderful damask in the background. And it has 3 different looks, but we're going to look at the top pieces. We are actually going to take all of these pieces out of the cabinet so you can get a close-up look. But I thought that you should see them in situ before we do that. Interestingly, I like to put small things on the top shelf because they seem to show better, and that's what what Susan has done here. And these are all dolls. Most of the dolls are by Galluba and Hofmann, which was a very important porcelain manufacturer in the turn of the last century. So I wanted you to see how this study group has been set up so that you can look and compare. Well, we have moved all of the figures to this space so that way we can really get in there closer with the camera. So I'm going to start with the dolls in the center because with Susan and Lou's journey in this study group, it started with this magnificent group in the center. And this is one of the first items that Susan and Lou purchased when they started their doll journey. And it is interesting, that we're all imprinted in where we started. And before Susan and Lou collected dolls, they were very big in advertising. And think of advertising beautiful lithography cans and posters, and most of those things had the ladies with the big picture hats. So this is kind of fulfilling that same concept, but in 3-dimensional and in miniature. So what we have is a group of Galluba and Hofmann ladies, and I kind of visualize them as a group of ladies in, say, 1912, 13 in Vienna, and they're having the latest craze, which is the coffee houses. And if you notice, this one has a book, and she has a very interesting book holder. But what is fascinating to me as a costumer, in order to costume these, you have to costume them in the sitting position, which is very unusual and difficult to do because you have to figure out how they look the best sitting. So we've got 1, 2, 3 figures that have cloth clothing and one in with all bisque clothing. Now, one thing I love about this era is basically people were T-shaped. So you would have the huge hat on top, and then you were like a cylinder down from there. So we're going to take this out of its arrangement so that we can get in there and you can see the detail of the face. They're very delicately painted, and I would imagine that in order to get the china painting on this small of a size, you would have to basically use one little hair off of a sable brush. So the makers of these were highly, highly skilled. And in order to make it, there were multiple parts in order to get this whole thing together. And I would imagine there was an incredible amount of breakage. And of course, when I lift her up, you can see that it's not an easy job to get these ladies dressed. But in a way, this era is simplistic, and with some imagination, you can do it pretty effectively. I'm going to try to get her. Let's see if I can get her. Yep, I got her. And this one has, the hat is removable, but you can see, you'd almost think that this was over scale. But for the time frame, this is right on. And I think that the crimped wig with a very light bun is also beautiful. And this one you can really, I can get her in the light for you, you can really see the delicate painting. Most of the time, these figures will have some kind of molded accessory, like she has a fan, it could be a teacup, it could be a book, etc. And I'm going to just set her here for now, and then I will show you the lady with the book. And the Nunez collection has more than one of these, and I think it's very interesting that she's really grasping the book. And think of making that, how difficult that was, and the fabric had to go under the book to dress it. These were not toys, these were decorative art items. And then another thing I want to point out is, look at, they painted a little tiny bracelet. Now if these were nude, you would find that they would have a corset on and some form of pantalettes. So they were risque, but they weren't totally nude. Now I'm attributing everything on the table to Galluba and Hofmann, and we've looked at her, and here's another version of her with an even bigger hat. So this lady was at the height of fashion. And really for us as collectors, it's a huge responsibility to have dolls like this, because there's so much that can go wrong. So we're really fortunate to be able to take these out and examine them. But this has got a very avant-garde black and white lace and tulle dress, and again a beautiful face. This one has an open mouth with teeth, which I think is pretty amazing to do in this tiny, well, look at the size of my thumb versus her whole face. And we can see that we've kind of got a thing going on here where they're the same mold, but because they're handmade and the arms would be separate pieces that would be put on in the greenware stage, the placement is not exactly right. And when the dolls are in greenware stage, they can slump one way or the other. So in actuality, they're all one of a kind. The next piece we're going to look at, which we have two items that appear to be exactly alike, but one is a little bit bigger. And I will explain that to you, why it's just a little slightly bit bigger. Now here we have a lady that's very ladylike, slightly in the 18th century taste as far as dressing, which there was a revival in that in this period. But we have somebody who's really risque, because she has her skirt hiked up over her knee. And let me tell you, a real lady at that time would not be showing her pantalettes and her knees, even though skirts were on their way to being short. This is meant to be provocative and slightly risque. You can see she has the book that we've seen on another figure, and a very defined bracelet, which is lovely, and a beautiful face. This one appears to me, from my feeble eyesight, is a closed mouth. So it's not an open mouth with teeth, a closed mouth. Not a giant picture hat, but pretty darn large. Now, one thing I have just learned recently from an expert doll maker is that as molds are used, the later dolls in the mold become bigger, because it's losing a layer of skin, which can make the last dolls a little bit larger. And I think that's what's happening here, because it's not a whole size bigger, it's just slightly larger. But it actually works in this tableau because it gives all different scales. And of course, she's in the seated position, which is problematic for dressing. But this one is very, very well done, I think. So now the group that we have together in this set of 4 are actually, truly, really fashion dolls. We hear the term fashion dolls all the time. And what a fashion doll, the definition of it is someone whose job was to sell the latest fashions for children, for adults. They are models, mannequins, if you like. So what we have going on is a change in era. So if we look at the 2 in the center, which we're going to come back to, and I think this is fascinating. Susan didn't collect these both at the same time, but look what we have going on. We have virtually the same silk, although this one is a little more tender, the same silk, the same lace, and the same trim. So I am not sure of whose fashion house this was, but these were their fashion dolls. And they probably lost their labels, but you can see it's really of the period, probably 1907, 8, 9, 10 in that period. And this one is maybe a little bit later. But these are Galluba and Hofmann. They're just their jumbos. And you can see that they're still doing their accessories on their pieces. She's got a gray glove on her, a little wristlet glove, and then she's holding a glove. Now again, we don't know what a dressmaker this is. It would have probably had a paper label on the bottom, but that's long gone. They've got the latest hairstyles, the latest decorations. Now these 2, at first you look at them and you say, what's different? The faces are much more animated. There's a lot of shadowing on the faces, lots of heavy makeup. Well, there's a reason for this. There's a thing that started to happen at this period called the cinema. And suddenly women are seeing these really made up ladies on the screen. And that really started the industry of makeup as we see it today. So I'm going to turn her around, and she's got a lovely little pink hobble skirt, which again, it's like a T. It's a straight column, and then it comes up. And the lovely animated hands. In this case, we've got a handheld cloth accessory as opposed to made out of bisque in China, which is what we've seen before. But you can almost see the same look in a wax mannequin, a store mannequin of the time. But this was easy to display. This could go on a countertop, and not only would the dressmakers use these, I think that they could, a lady could buy it and put it on her dressing table. Now the last one that I'm going to show in this group is the absolute most important of anything that's on this table. Because this is a porcelain base, this is a porcelain base. This still has its label on it. And this is a very important couturier named Madame Lucile. And anybody that is familiar with the story of, the true story of the Titanic will have heard of Lady Duff Gordon. And Lady Duff Gordon was in fact Madame Lucile. And she was a very, very talented dressmaker, dress designer. And she had, I'm going to pick her up so my cameraman can see her closer. She was very successful, and she had shops in London. She had shops in New York, and she had shops in Paris. And she really, really understood how to use, let's call it what it was, social media of the time. And I believe, someone can correct me, but I think she was one of the first designers at that period that used live fashion shows as a way to sell her products. But her reputation was ruined by her conduct on the Titanic. And I think that that has affected her place in history, in the history of fashion. But we have here, this is, I think, right of the era of the Titanic. So you could see that this is something that someone could come down the grand staircase of the Titanic wearing this Madame Lucile dress. So I hope you enjoy this little peek at these very, very delicate treasures from the Nunez collection. Bye-bye, doll friends.
Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button.